And this is what we need to fight in Washington. I've co-sponsored every bill I know how to do to destroy the Department of Education and pull money out of Washington, but we need a majority back in 2023 when we get in January to do that. Healthcare, corporations. I can go down a laundry list. Corporations are running this country right now. We've got to end that. We've got to stand up against corporations and the corporate cronyism that's destroying freedom. We're not free if American Airlines is going to be kicking people off or coming after us because they want to say that Texas can't pass election reform. Or if Major League Baseball is going to move the All-Star game from a 50% black city in Atlanta to a 10% black city in Denver, where a bunch of white people run around patting themselves on the back with their fancy stickers on their Subarus, feeling good about themselves and being woke, they moved the Major League Baseball All-Star game. But corporations we know are clamping down on free speech. They're killing us on Twitter, on Facebook. But it's not just that. It's Amazon, it's Google, it's Apple. I joined with 6 of my colleagues to send a letter saying we're not going to take any money from any of those big tech companies. We're turning down their money and we're going after them with antitrust laws in the Judiciary Committee. Charlie and I were just talking about what we would call or describe as endless wars, and how many people in Washington are perfectly content that we're now in the 20th year of a war operating under an authorization of force passed in 2001, and our men and women in uniform being in Afghanistan. We are proud of every single one of our men and women in uniform who have served our country. And do me a favor, if you served, if you're a veteran of the United States military, would you please stand up? Every one of you have sacrificed for this country. We are proud of you, and we're proud of everyone that are sacrificing right now. But we don't need to have men and women in uniform building soccer fields and schools in Afghanistan and in Syria. What we need to do is be doing what President Trump did, was blow up Soleimani and make sure that we're defending our interests around the world. Energy. What do we have going on in the Biden administration? They're attacking our Texas way of life, our ability to have a strong economy, but as important as anything, make and drive energy prices up. Banning fracking, stopping fracking and drilling in federal lands, ending the Keystone Pipeline. So I'm proud to have co-sponsored what we call a discharge petition to move to the floor and force a vote in the House floor. Leadership wouldn't do it, but my friend Lauren Boebert introduced a bill in Colorado to open up lands and to end those Biden executive orders. And then I filed a discharge petition last week to make us have a vote on the floor of the House on that bill and force Democrats to have to eat that vote. We need to do more of that. We need more action. So I'm doing more of that. And we're going to use every tool we have at our disposal. And we're going to force a vote on energy freedom in America. Security, cops, guns. The left wants to make us unsecure and make us unable to defend ourselves. In Austin right now, we are living with a city under siege, with homeless encampments all over the city, where the Austin cops are now at 1999 levels in terms of the number of police officers on the street, and we're bleeding more every single day. Tomorrow in Austin, we've been leading the fight on a Proposition B to try to reinstate the ban on homeless encampments, and we're fighting Harbor City Council. I just had a phone call on the way here to try to push them to reinstate funding for the police department. Tomorrow in San Antonio, there's an important vote to support the police officers. If you're in San Antonio, get out and vote. We need to make sure that we support Proposition B. We're opposed to Proposition B in San Antonio. We're for Proposition B in Austin. We're against Proposition B in San Antonio to support our law enforcement in San Antonio. So we not.
Proposition A in San Antonio.
Amen. Absolutely. And we need to make sure that we're standing up for security and standing up for our guns. Texas needs to be a constitutional carry state. Why on earth? And I'm going to wrap up soon to get to the main event. Why on earth is Bernie Sanders representing a constitutional carry state, but Ted Cruz is not? Someone answer that question for me. What are we doing wrong in Texas that we're having to follow Vermont to have constitutional carry? So make sure our folks in Austin know that we need constitutional carry. And this is the last point that I want to make. The COVID virus and lockdowns. We have destroyed our country in the name of a false name of panic. Something that's been created, it's purposeful, and it is done to try to have control. control over our kids, control over our schools, control over our small businesses. And Charlie and I were just talking about how much we've lost 100,000 small businesses across America. Do you know how much revenue increased for Amazon last year alone? $100 billion. $100 billion in increased revenue in 2020. We have a corporate cronyist system in this country, and we have to attack it and attack it head on. And Republicans need to stop being patsies for the National Chamber of Commerce. I know right now we're looking at the depth of despair of our frustration. Last night, Kellyanne Conway was kind enough to come speak to the Hayes County Lincoln Reagan dinner. And we were there, and she and I visited. She and I worked together on Ted Cruz's super PAC back in 2016 before she went to work for President Trump. And Kellyanne's a great friend. But we had a great conversation about why we should be optimistic, because we actually should, as Americans, be optimistic. There's this right here. This was not occurring 2 years ago or 4 years ago or 6 years ago. The number of people showing up at events across this district and across the country is more than I've ever seen. The difference, what we've got to do now this time, is we have to take this energy and turn it to action. In 2017, we abandoned President Trump. We did not bring the House of Representatives, which I wasn't a part of at the time. The House of Representatives left him hanging on health care, on spending, on immigration and border security and amnesty, on all of the important issues. So what I'm spending my time working on right now is preparing and trying to fight the fight, throw sand in the gears and delay time, but to make sure that we're ready in the spring of 2023 when we get back in power, and Lord willing in January 25, to make sure we do the right thing. And so what I mentioned before, the discharge petitions to force a vote, a discharge petition to force a vote on Title 42 COVID protections at the border, which Border Patrol desperately needs. I'm forcing a vote on that. Leadership wasn't doing it, but we're going to bring it to the floor. I introduced a bill to defund the United Nations Population Fund. That's something that absolutely. Why are our tax dollars going to the United Nations to then fund China and their ridiculous policies killing the unborn? So we should not do that. And finally, I just want to say that we've got an opportunity in front of us. If all the young folks that are out here stand up and do the right thing and get engaged, we can actually change this. What starts here in Texas, we can take to the rest of the country. I'm going to turn it over to Charlie in just 1 second. What Charlie's doing and reaching out to the young folks across this country is extraordinarily important. And every one of you who's in this room know that that future lies with you, and knocking doors and making phone calls and getting engaged and going down to the legislature. But this is the greatest country in the history of the world. But I said something the other day on the floor of the United States House of Representatives, and I got into a little bit of trouble. In fact, I got called John Calhoun for saying it by Jerry Nadler, so take that for what it's worth. But I said on the floor of the House, on San Jacinto Day, I had 3 minutes on the floor because that's what we get. We get, doled out time. And I said on the floor of the House that Texans are starting to wonder whether it remains worth it to be a part of the union. Now, think about what that means, right? And think about how important a statement that is, but it's true. When Texas would secure its border, but America won't, then what benefit do we have in the union? If we would say that our schools should look like this, but Washington won't let us, what benefit is there? If we would secure our elections, but they won't let us, what benefit is there? If we would stand with Israel, but they'll walk away from Israel, what benefit is there? This is a question that we need to ask ourselves, and we need to loudly and proudly say that here in Texas, we're going to start taking control of our lives. And we need to do that at the border. We need to do that in our schools. We need to do that with election reform. We need to do that with guns. We need to do that with police. And we need to then send a message to America, you got a little bit more time to get this right, or we're going to take care of this ourselves. Charlie Kirk is a great American. He's a great friend. We met for the first time, I think, about 6 or 7 years ago when I worked for Senator Cruz, maybe 8 years ago. And he is doing the Lord's work and energizing young folks to be out there and advancing the cause of liberty. He knows exactly where the pulse is right now. We have the opportunity to take on the corporations, go after all of the corporate cronyism, what's going on between Washington and the corporations running our country, and to advance and encourage the young to get out there and change this country. Charlie grew up outside of Chicago, but he happily lives in Arizona right now, and he's running a great organization, and it's my honor to introduce Charlie Kirk.
Thank you, man. Thank you, man. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Wow, what a great sound system. Thank you for having me. This is awesome. And thank you, Chip. We've known each other for years, and I'll tell you what, if we had more fighters in D.C., this country would be in a much better place, especially talking about challenging the corporations in our country. I mean, if you're like me, I don't watch Major League Baseball anymore. I try not to fly Delta Airlines anymore. I don't drink Coca-Cola anymore. That's just the beginning of the list, and so I completely agree with that sentiment. It's an honor to be here, and you guys could be doing a lot of other things on a night like this, but you chose to be here for a reason. And it's the same reason that I'm saying yes to almost every single speaking event. And first, I want to say thank you to Lee. Where is Lee? She's somewhere. You've done a great job. You've done a great job. And I also want to point out our amazing Turning Point USA students and young people that are here. They give me hope. I'll tell you what, they are so amazing. They do a great job. But you're here the same reason I'm here, which is I'm not going to sit idly by while this gift that we've been given is going to get stolen from us. This republic, this gift, the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world, is going to be dominated, and we're going to get steamrolled by a bitter minority in our country. We are being governed by maybe 2 or 3% of a very angry minority of people that think they could take over our value system, our country, our companies, our schools, because they think they're entitled to it, or this country is terrible or awful. So I want to explore that with you tonight, and then I want to do questions. That's the most fun, and kind of hear what's going on here in Texas and how I might be helpful. Chip mentioned this. Look, you guys know this more than ever. I was saying this 6 years ago when I was in Texas, which is that this state might flip sometime soon. I think you guys are feeling that. You're feeling that pressure. You're feeling that out-of-state money. So you look at Texas and you look at Florida. Which state is actually considered to be a more conservative state now? Florida, not Texas. In Florida, they were open first. They have open carry. They just passed an anti-riot bill. They're going after the tech companies. They just said no critical race theory in any of our schools. It's illegal to teach it. They're going to sign, awesome. Ron DeSantis has pledged to sign a very basic, simple bill that men should not be able to compete in women's sports, which is a conservative value that we should fight for. And it comes down to, in Florida, great leadership, and there's some great people in this state. There's some people that are working really hard. But I'm a big believer more than ever that those of us that are conservatives, and we're going to talk about what a conservative is, because I don't think we do a good enough job of explaining that. We are going to win bigger than ever before if we are bold and clear as to why we believe what we believe. The era of moderate republicanism is over. The era of going towards the middle and constantly suing for peace. I call these people the Neville Chamberlain Republicans. If you're like me, I want someone like Ron DeSantis, who's going to go out and speak clearly on why we believe what we believe, and be unafraid to pick the tough fights, but the ones that matter to your voters. You see, what I've come to realize about politics, and this is what Donald Trump taught us, is that a lot of people enter politics actually open-minded. Is that people would rather go vote for something and for someone instead of against, like, oh, it's an anti-Democrat vote. That works in certain parts of the world. Texas Hill Country, I don't think a Democrat's going to get elected anytime soon. And I don't know, though. But the point is that they're working on it, right? They always are. They never stop. These people are focused, and they never stop. And instead, we have to say, what do we believe? So a conservative, in the most simple terms, is someone who understands limitations on human beings, powers, and things that work. It's a pretty easy way to explain what a conservative is. We know that too much power in a small group of people is bound to be corrupted. By the way, that rule applies in the IRS as it does with Google. So we believe in limited government, but we really believe in limited power. We believe that a small group of people with too much power without a check and a balance is a bad thing for human freedom. So why do we like freedom? Well, freedom is a moral good. Every human being has a right to be free. This is the natural rights law, natural rights doctrine, which, by the way, being in the house of the Lord is an amazing thing because we get our rights from God and not from government. And we should be unafraid to say that. And we know things that work as conservatives. So here's the one thing that we know that has worked timeless: the family. It is the bedrock of any functioning civil society. I'm so honored to be here at this church, and I saw the 10 Commandments out there. Now, the only piece of feedback I'll add is that it says honor your mother and father in one of the feedbacks, in one of the commandments, but it's the full sentence in the Bible is honor your mother and father so that you might live long and prosper in which the land you are in. It's the only one of the 10 Commandments with a promise in it. Now, why does that matter? Well, because if you stop honoring your mother and father and you break that bond between a parent and a child, the state is going to replace it. You ever hear the phrase Mother Russia before? Well, because in Soviet Russia, they removed the idea that your mom and dad mean the most, instead Stalin means more. You guys ever hear of Mao's Red Guard? It was 9, 10, and 11-year-olds that worked for Mao Zedong, where they broke that bond of the mother and the child, or the father and the child, and they put the state in between. So put very simply, we as conservatives know things that work. We know private property works. We know that the American spirit of starting things from nothing is something that has created more opportunity and wealth than any other experiment in economics ever. With that being said, we also shouldn't all of a sudden act as if Amazon making $100 billion is a conservative value. That's not something that is necessarily a good thing for the amazing small business owners in this local area. So we have to be a little bit more detailed in how we describe our economic views. I would rather have 100 new small businesses in Bandera, Texas, than Amazon make another $100 in profit out of Bandera, Texas. I would rather have, and that's a conservative view. A conservative view is that men and women are different. That men are men and women are women. God knows that we need each other, and I'm getting married a week from tomorrow. It's very exciting. And it'll be a lifelong journey of continuing to learn that, is what I've been told by successful married couples. We know these things work. We know that life is worthy of preserving. And we know that the tough fights when it comes to life actually matter the most. We know that when we oversee 1 million abortions every single year, and we can't get that issue right, don't be surprised when we start messing up all the other issues. That we need to defend the people that can't defend themselves in this country. That we need to defend the people that are in the womb and they have no ability to defend themselves in any way, shape, or form. So we as conservatives, sometimes we have to pick the tough fights. We have to wear the labels of being called things we aren't. But popular culture puts that on us because we say no because we know those things are bad for you. That, as a conservative, we have to get into the fight. You see, you know how easy my job would be if I was a liberal, if I traveled the country and I said, do whatever you want to do and seek pleasure and not virtue. You know how easy my job would be to say, and if you ever run out of pleasure, go blame somebody else, and we'll forgive your student loan debt, we'll give you free housing, we'll give you a check in the mail, and we'll go tell you who to protest to make sure you get rewarded for that. Our job's harder. Our job is, hey, you got to go get married and be faithfully loyal to that person. You got to know why you're in this country. You got to go find a job and be good at that job, and don't blame other people if all of a sudden things don't go your way. And then you got to keep yourself in a framework where it actually keeps you more free. I'll get to that in a second. A framework of virtue. Our founding fathers knew this. That John Adams famously said, it's one of the greatest quotes in the American founding. He said, "This constitutional republic we have is only written for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the people of any other, or the government of any other." So if we don't have the wise restraints that keep us free, forget it. You'll screw that up in one generation. And so let's talk about that. And I say this to younger audiences all the time, and this is the opposite of what they're hearing in our school system. What if I told you what you don't do keeps you free? What if I told you when you say no to a substance, a website, a party, or an indulgence, you actually might be more free from that? There's a great quote in the Harvard Law School. as you walk down the stairwell. They're totally going to remove it sometime soon, which says the law is the wise restraints that keep men free. Think about that. So a restraint, not doing something, actually keeps you free. We all know people that struggle with alcoholism, addiction. We know that those people are anything but free. So what we should be talking about is only liberty. Liberty is not being able to do whatever you want to do, however you want to do it. No. Liberty is government not getting in the way of you pursuing virtue. That's a different way that we've been describing liberty over the last 20, 30 years. So what is virtue? Well, virtue, thankfully, being in the house of the Lord, we know the proper way to act. Now, we are a constitutional republic, so we have people of different faiths and religions and backgrounds, and we should embrace that in our country. However, nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it say separation of church and state. That is a lie. It does not say that in the U.S. Constitution. So, instead, we have to understand the Founding Fathers were Bible-believing, faith-filled people that were inspired to try to do something no one's ever done before, which is to break away and govern themselves. You guys understand this is the human exception, right? That most of the rest of the world is going back in a safetyism direction. Send me money and take care of me. That's the way the rest of the world really works. This short experiment in self-governance, in being able to take care of your neighbor, going to church for ultimate meaning, and not the DMV for ultimate meaning, which is kind of creepily where they want to bring us. That window is closing. So what do we do about it? I talked about this there. This is where I want to really focus my time. Action. So the Greeks had two different words for time. It's all throughout the book of Mark. One of the words is chronos. So what time is it? It's about, 8 o'clock. The other word is kairos, which means a time of action. Not all time is created equal. This time we're in right now will be the most consequential moment in American history. This is the time where historians will say, hey, people who love their country lost the House and surprisingly the Senate and the presidency. Their kids were being taught to hate the country. All the corporations are rigged against them. The border was open. They were getting kicked off social media. And the historians will write this moment in one of two ways. Either people who loved America rose up in record numbers like never before and started to retake terrain, speak boldly with truth, and empower the next generation. Or Americans said, I got too much to lose. I don't want to lose my job, my friends. I don't want to be called a racist. And they retreated into agreement and managed the decline of America. So here's where I'm at. The reason why I'm speaking more and why I'm inspired by all of you and why we're more active, we're starting more chapters at Turning Point USA, is I'm going to do whatever it takes to try to revitalize America back to that place of greatness and prosperity where our children love America again, where we can get back to a place where children actually love their country more than their parents do, where we can get to a place where parents have to calm down their kids because they're so fired up about Thomas Jefferson and Teddy Roosevelt and John Adams and James Madison and George Washington. But that's only going to happen if we fill in the biggest missing gap in America, and that's the courage gap. The biggest issue with the conservative movement right now is that there's a voice in your ear that prevents you from taking the dramatic action that is needed. That might be showing up to a school board meeting. That might be speaking truth to a neighbor. That might be running for office. That might be doing a social media post. Whatever that is, there's a courage gap. We all know it. We complain a lot about censorship. I'm all over that. But do you know the number one form of censorship in America is? Self-censorship. That's exactly right. It's people shutting themselves up. I don't want to pick that fight. I don't want to wear the MAGA hat into the grocery store. I'm afraid to wear the American flag on, when I go into a bar in downtown Austin. So only us bridging that courage gap, and that starts with you. It's the people who want to spend their nights and weekends at a church hearing about how they can resave this country. And so let's talk about what a country is. There are three different views of what America is in Washington, D.C. A country, a colony, and a commune. I believe America is a country, which means that we have a common language, hopefully, a common history, common values, a connective tissue. We share stories with each other. We know where we came from. We know who sacrificed for us to be here. We share ancestors that fought in wars together, and we have ultimate purpose. The second view is America as a colony. Some Republicans, by the way, view America as a colony. Make as much money as possible, maximize my profits, let whoever wants to come into America who wants to come in, and if needed, we'll go move to Singapore or Wuhan. Nothing special about this place. America can move. I reject that idea wholeheartedly. This is our home. This is not a temporary place to go make money. And the third way is America is a commune, that there should be no private property, that we will exist in this utopian, which means never, by the way. You have to go back to the root of the word utopia, where some form of a heavenly state on earth will be ushered in by some Marxist idea. That's the least likely actually to happen, believe it or not. What's more likely is the arc that always ends up filling the void of the Marxist dreamers, totalitarianism. Always. That we have plenty of examples for. The promises of the communists always end in you getting social control. So at Turning Point USA, we opened up as much as we could. We did events everywhere. I think these lockdowns will go down as the worst mistake in American history. Let me say that again. These lockdowns will go down as the worst mistake in American history. Children that have to be quarantined with their abusers, mental health issues, alcoholism, drug usage. We lost more young people in California to suicide than to the Chinese coronavirus. And by the way, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for calling it the Chinese coronavirus because, no, seriously, this is something that Chip fought against and he spoke against. There's this bill in the Senate, 94-1, everyone voted for it except Josh Hawley, who's great, by the way, who said that they could criminalize anyone that talks about the Chinese coronavirus as a hate crime. Look, I called it the China virus last year. I'm going to call it the China virus again. It came from China, okay? I'm going to say that. So we'll see what happens. I think there might be a new piece of legislation that's going to, I don't know. That's where they're going, though, criminalizing speech. And so what do we do about it? I'm going to give you a couple pieces of action. If you're not feeling the hurt, if you have not sacrificed a friendship, a business contract, you're not in the fight enough. Can anyone here name every single school board member from their local area? Unless you're a school board member, that's cheating. Anyone? 1 or 2, 3 or 4 people? That's the problem, everybody. I'm going to lovingly say this. I'm saying this as a friend and as a fellow. You can't name your school board members. They're steamrolling your kids, everybody. And you're like, oh, I don't have kids. Well, you got kids you care about in the local area that are learning to hate the country. Fredericksburg High School, we were just talking. They got all sorts of nonsense being taught over there. All over the place. So why is it that conservatives, we complain about this stuff, and we don't even know our school board members, let alone showing up for public comment, let alone running for it? And now a couple people raised their hands, they knew, but the vast majority know. Here's why. Number one, we have focused on building things that matter more than that. Businesses, families, and churches. While we were building the church, while we were building our family, the left was infiltrating our institutions. They were taking over school boards. They were taking over university boards. They were rewriting textbooks and taking over our corporations. So the very minimal thing is if I come back here next year, everyone should raise their hand and they should say, this person's on the school board, this person was on the school board, this and this. That's as basic as it gets, everybody. Because here in Texas Hill Country, you guys already have critical race theory being introduced, and at St. Mary's School in Fredericksburg, I saw the curriculum myself. Karl Marx is being taught to 8-year-olds as a positive political figure. St. Mary's School in Fredericksburg. I saw it last night myself. Parent came up to me. Well, look, well, what are we doing? I'm going to be honest, if I could give you some tough love. Watching Tucker Carlson every night and buying a pillow is not going to save Western civilization. Love Mike Lindell. By the way, promo code Kirk at checkout, okay? And we're all friends here. We're all equally guilty. Look, 5 years ago, I thought this was a battle of ideas. 5 years ago, I thought we were in this massive big college debate where we could all get in a room have really good discussion. But I've realized the more we've grown Turning Point USA, this is not a coffee shop discussion. This is a brass knuckle fight for the future of the country. And look, we're talking about, we can go find common ground and this. And meanwhile, they're introducing a resolution for H.R. 1, H.R. 5, the Equality Act, adding D.C. as a state, H.R. 5, which would destroy Christian organizations in this country and put transgenderism as the focus. And we're talking about, I think what we need is a $600 billion infrastructure package, not a $4 trillion infrastructure package. And so I get it. I'm there with you. But here's the positive part. So you might say, well, Charlie, what's the takeaway? How about this? Just know every single local official. How many people know there's elections tomorrow? Anyone know that? Good. Not every hand went up, but that's somewhat horrifying. But here in Texas, tomorrow, municipal elections. None in your county? Okay. There are some in this local area, though, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, good. And you guys already voted. Good. And by the way, I have this whole theory. They put it on the weekends so that Republicans wouldn't show up. In Texas, I have this whole, anyway, that's a different discussion for a different time. Anyway, so that's the very least of it. But here's the bigger ask, and it's a mindset shift. I could give you a list of to-do items that we could do together, like stop giving money to your alma mater, probably don't send your kid to college. We can go through that stuff, right? But what you need is a mindset shift, which is this. You're not a spectator anymore. Can I tell you the question that bothers me the most? When someone comes up and they say, hey, Charlie, how's it going out there? As if I'm a running back for the Houston Texans, right? Or I'm like Maximus from Gladiator, keep it up, man, we're cheering for you. I love this support. But really, I think to myself, I'm no different than you. I didn't go to college. I'm a kid from Chicago. I'm 27 years old, and I tried to start something. I dedicated my life to it. Happened to hit a time when people are worried about the decline of the country, and I'm really interested in this, and we work really hard. Anyone can do this. It's I'm no different than you. I didn't go to Harvard or Yale or Stanford. The point is that the question should be this. Charlie, man, I'm feeling the hurt just like you are. I'm knocking on more doors than I can remember, and I'm in the face of my school board members. Thanks for fighting alongside me. That's what I want to hear. So it's the spectator from in the arena. And it's hard. I get it. I know a lot of you are already on thin ice. I get it. Where you're I can't even keep it all together. I got to get my kids to sports. I got to pay the rent. I get it. So there's 3 types of good people in the world. The people that do nothing. That's not going to be us tonight. The fighters. The people with energy and time. But then there's another type of people. The people that help the fighters. And by the way, they're equally as important as the fighters. Because maybe your full-time job can't be doing this stuff. So maybe I'm going to go find the person that's outspoken and courageous and active, and I'm going to be an auxiliary on. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's a meal. Maybe it's prayer, which is super important. And maybe it's just thinking about it. The combined intelligence of this room right now could get this Karl Marx nonsense out of St. Mary's School in Fredericksburg in one night. As soon as people start thinking about this in groups like this, things start to change. Ideas start to get presented. So, and I'll close with this, then we'll do some questions, because I really want to get into that. Here's why I'm optimistic for a couple reasons. But America's good at one thing that no other country's really good at. And so if we were France, they're good at retreating. If we were Italy, they're really good at pleasure, right? If it was United Kingdom, they're really good at complaining, right? And so every country has an attribute of which they're good at. And by the way, I have friends in all these countries, right? And the Germans are very precise. There's a lot of Germans in this part of the world, by the way. You follow the rules, right? Very precise. But no, the Americans are different. I'll tell you what we're bad at than what we're good at. Here's what we're bad at. We're always late to the game. It's an attribute of the Americans, right? We're not exactly always ahead of the curve. So the greatest man to live in the 20th century, without a doubt, was Winston Churchill, right? No doubt. And we don't teach our children Churchill, and we should. But on Pearl Harbor, almost everyone was solemn and was crying. But Winston Churchill walks into his war cabinet with a smile a mile wide. And his war cabinet says, "What is wrong with you?" And he's got a cigar in one hand, and he says, "We have won the war. Because now the Americans have awoken, and it is over." And so he knew what was true then, and it's still true now with all of you. And in some ways, we saw this with the virus. And I don't think we give ourselves enough credit. That versus the rest of the world outside of China, we were able to push back against some of these lockdowns and reopen. Germany just went through another lockdown, by the way, till June. That when we dedicate ourselves to one thing and we know it's the right thing, watch out. So what Americans are the best at, and that's us. It's our story. It's our shared history. Remember, that's a nation. That's a country, not a colony. Is that, okay, we got a big problem. We got a problem, and quite honestly, it's a cultural blitzkrieg. It's a shock and awe campaign. You wake up and Aunt Jemima's gone, then Dr. Seuss is gone, and you got kids taking a knee in math class, and math is racist, and you're like, Major League Baseball's acting like a Democrat super PAC, and you lost Coca-Cola, and you say, when's it gonna stop? The only time it stops is when you punch back twice as hard as when it stops. Is when you say, we're not gonna take this anymore. And so, that's the mindset shift, and that's what we're the best at as Americans. We're the best at the big fights. We're the best at rising up, albeit a little bit tardy and a little bit late. But as Winston Churchill said, it is a boiler that generates heat that never runs out. He said it's unlimited. And we've seen this before. We saw this, by the way, in like a little bit in 2016 with Donald Trump when people rose up. But I think we're actually entering the 20s, and I have evidence for this, where the Democrats are unbelievably underestimating us. They're so cocky. Do you see how they walk around? They don't think they're ever going to lose an election again. They don't. They think H.R. 1, power grab, you stupid Republicans, we're in charge, you're not, sit down and obey. If not, we're going to come raid your apartment, spy on you on social media. We are going to use the apparatus of government. When I look at Joe Biden's speech, and barely 11 million people watched. When I look at the Oscars, only 9 million people watched. When I look at Joe Biden, 81 million vote president, who can't even get, literally, this is a bigger crowd than Joe Biden drew in Georgia. It's actually pretty amazing. I think to myself, this multiracial working class party based on values, based on common sense, based on things that are near and dear to us, I think they're vastly underestimating it. And I don't just mean politically. I think they are overplaying their hand in such a dramatic way. We all know the analogy of the boiling frog, where they ever so slightly increase the heat and the frog is boiled before you know it. Their biggest mistake is they are not introducing this radicalism at a metered pace. This is all at once. And so it's up to us. The best news and the worst news I have for you tonight is that the future of the country is actually on you. It's great because it has yet to be determined, and it's based on your agency. It's bad because I'm telling you, you're gonna be called bad names. You're gonna lose something. You're gonna have to get into a place of a little bit uncomfortable. You're gonna have to get in someone's face maybe. You may have to go challenge someone that's in power. You may have to go do something you otherwise wouldn't do. But the reason they're preemptively striking, the reason that we have a top-down revolution, the first ever top-down revolution in world history, where the powerful people are declaring war on normal people, right, is because they are trying to preempt what is about to happen, which we know in the laws of physics, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, which is people that love their country taking it back. And it requires you. And it requires action. And that's exactly why we're here tonight. So thank you, guys. Let's do some questions, and I really appreciate it. We have a mic, Jake? That's 1, 2. Good. Okay, we're still getting it. If not, anyone in the front row want to yell it out? Yeah, go ahead. 1, 2, 1, 2. I'll repeat it. Yeah. Look, I mean, I tend to not weigh in on local issues unless I live there. Now, if you ask me the governor of Arizona, I'd tell you what to do. Here's what I'll tell you. Style matters more than substance. So if you're going to say something adversarial to someone in charge, have charm and have a smile. I mean this. You know, don't give them. They'll dismiss you if you're too, enthusiastic. Let's put it that way. But be very clear. Speak your mind with truth, whatever that might be. And again, I'll let you guys, the citizens of Texas, tell me whether Abbott's doing a good job or bad job. I don't know. I don't live here. I read things, whatever. Okay. And then the citizen of and for and by the people, you should communicate that. And you got to get your words right. And you might tremble. And you might not sleep from now to the prayer breakfast. That's true. And you might be praying, but I don't know if you're a Christian, James 1:5. It's one of the few things in the Bible God guarantees he will give generously, which is wisdom. Now, what is wisdom? Any young person can tell me what wisdom is? The knowledge of things that never change. That's what wisdom is. So there's practical knowledge and eternal knowledge, right? Practical knowledge, who's the governor of Texas? Greg Abbott. That's going to change inevitably at some point, right? Then there's eternal knowledge, which is the laws of nature and nature's God, as the founders put in the Declaration. This is how humans act. For example, Proverbs 14:28. Without a vision, the people perish. Right? That is a human law. If you don't honor your mother and father, the country won't continue to exist. That's what we call wisdom, but it's really, most simply put, eternal knowledge of things that don't change. So you pray for the right words, the right wisdom to articulate what you're feeling. Not just that you're angry or mad, but how to communicate in that actually might effectuate something. And only you and your relationship to your Creator can give you that. But it also says to ask for courage. Fear is not of the Lord. Do not be afraid is in the Bible how many times? 365 times. One for every single day. So from now till Monday, you got plenty of scriptures to read there. And whatever that might be, I am fully supportive, let me be very clear, of people communicating their feelings to their elected representatives. Do not be silent with that. Tell them when they're doing a good job. Tell them when they're not doing a good job. That is a very, very important thing. That's my feedback to you. Okay, question here.
Hi, so I go to UTSA, and here in Texas we have a bill called Senate Bill 11, and it allows universities to create like safe spaces where you can ban guns. And one of the spaces is the dorms, and obviously living in the dorm, if I can't store it there, I can't have it at all. So I was wondering, what do you think about that, and also what should I do with that?
So is that in the Texas House? Senate?
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand what a Republican state would be doing restricting gun rights. It's a strange thing. So I don't know if you guys heard about that. I wouldn't imagine the governor would sign something like that. I don't know. I hope not. Look, it's a constitutional right to be able to protect yourself, to have a firearm and own a firearm. Texas should be a constitutional carry state, as Chip said. I completely and totally agree. And what you can do about it, don't underestimate the power that one person speaking truth courageously can make when it comes to one of those sorts of issues. And so maybe it's testifying, maybe it's getting a group of people together. Did you guys even know that bill existed? Maybe, maybe not. Talking to organizers, and there's many of whom in this room, going on radio programs and getting the word out. But I can't imagine if that gets signed into law. But the fact that's even being entertained, that there should be non-gun zones on college campuses. So this is what I always laugh about, is that the left, one of the biggest lies, I have a list of all the biggest lies, one of them is this idea that women are at danger of getting sexually assaulted disproportionately on college campuses versus other parts of society, right? It's a complete lie. It just is, there is no data to support it. And so there was this myth that 1 in 4 women, did you see that like a couple years, or get sexually assaulted on campus, which no one would send their daughter to campus if that was actually happening, right? Those are higher sexual assault rates than the Congo, okay? And so, however, if you actually believed that, wouldn't you want women to own firearms on campus? Like if you actually believe that men are out to kill you, wouldn't a gun be a good thing to be able to own? So that's how I would counter message that. Say, I as a woman do not feel safe without my firearm. Why are you making me feel unsafe? Use their own language against them. That's how I would fight against that. Thank you.
So you're talking about truth and courage and a few percentage of people controlling the society. Why aren't you talking about voter fraud?
Oh, I mean,
the industrialized voter fraud that you did not mention at all.
Well, don't get too accusatory, man. I literally led the charge on the voter fraud. You guys listen to my podcast, you know I did that more than almost any other commentator. So let's bring down the temperature a little bit. I also happen to be involved in the Arizona audit, trying to get to the bottom of this stuff, and so let's at least yield the platform of common shared goals and interests. I've said, and I'll say it again, this is the most interfered with election in American history. And the thing that no one wants to talk about is voter registration rolls and mail-in balloting practices. So what's happening in Arizona is a very, very important thing. And we're involved in this. In fact, we're pushing forward aggressively. And I think Georgia minorly trying to change their voter laws, I don't think that law went far enough. And here's my position on this, is that first, investigate and audit what happened previously, top to bottom. And the biggest vulnerability is the fact in Georgia, let's just use Georgia as an example, 242,000 ballots to 1.4 million mail-in ballots. And yet they had massive voter registration irregularities. Of course you're going to have issues when it comes to that. And they lowered the threshold of signature verification. And so look, here's what Republicans need to do on voter reform. They got to say to themselves, no matter what, they're going to call us racist, no matter what, right? So we should mandate voter ID. We got to get rid of no-fault absentee balloting, make it voting day, and if necessary, voting week, but no longer voting month. We have to make it more secure to vote in this country, and we got to clean up our voter rolls every 4 years. Deceased, moved voters, people that are ineligible. If you care about the republic, you need to be able to secure our elections. And just let me reinforce, there has been no louder voice when it comes to election reform. In fact, so much so that establishment Republicans are not very happy about the fact that we keep on covering the election. We did a whole show on Monday on the Arizona audit and what's happening there, and the judge that had to resign, and they have a new judge, a lot of suspicious stuff happening there. But I agree with your sentiment, because I could feel your anger, and that's fine, just don't throw it on me, is that if we don't fix these elections, what else actually matters, right? No, and I hear you, and you're right, I probably should have mentioned it, I do so many of these speeches, but we need to demand our lawmakers make changes so we can trust our elections again. Because what happened is if people go up and vote in massive numbers, and they do not believe or feel that their vote actually matters or has some sort of value, then elections are nothing more than a mirage. So we have to fix the way we do elections in our country, and that includes getting to the bottom of what actually happened. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Hey Charlie, thanks again for coming out. Really, really, really happy to see you. Okay,
high school, right?
Yeah, so I'm 16 years old, junior in high school, got 1 year left. President and founder of my chapter, Turning Point USA.
Give it up, that's awesome.
I'm in the arts, so I'm in theater, I'm in band, and I'm trying to get involved this year with my speech and debate team at my school. I am very outspoken, but I tend to kind of like calm down when it comes to getting in confrontation. I'm sure you get this question a lot from young conservatives. In what ways can I kind of like perfect my, how do I argue effectively? How do I stay on top? How do I keep battling on offense? And what sources should I use?
Totally. Yeah. So first of all, we need more conservatives in the arts. And I have a whole speech on this. I'll give you a short snippet of it. Leftist art is garbage. No, it is, because they're postmodernists. So they don't believe in objective beauty. So there's a reason why Johann Sebastian Bach is played in the Tokyo Philharmonic, a German composer in a Japanese, because it's the best music ever written. We believe some music is better than others. A Western value is believing in the hierarchy of the good, that certain action is better than others, certain art is better than others, and certain music is better than others. Now, what I just told you, you are not allowed to believe that at UT Austin. If I said that at UT Austin, they'd say I'm a racist, I'm a Eurocentrist, all these sorts of things. When in reality, I know what everyone else knows. That when you see a certain sunset in the Texas Hill Country and everyone stops and looks at it, that's objectively beautiful. When you hear a song like Clair de Lune, people stop and they cry because they know there's objective beauty there. We know that when you see a child, we know that that is worthy of protection. So this idea that beauty and goodness is nothing more than a construct, we know it's garbage. You know why? Every single civilization in the history of the world always stopped and stared at sunsets in awe of something that was bigger than themselves. They stared at the heavens and saw the skies and the stars, and they said, there's something there I can't quite understand. From the Greeks to the Romans to the Aztecs to the Mayans to the Chinese. It was, regardless of civilizational construct. And we also just know this from basic, what we would call common sense, which is, have you seen some of the trash that they've been putting on TV? That like Cardi B is art, like that is trash, okay? Complete and total trash is what that is. And so, but let me say, I'm encouraging you because we need conservatives in the arts. Now, they're getting rid of Shakespeare because he was a white male. Like, okay, Shakespeare probably perfected the English language and spread the English language more than any playwright. I literally had a leftist once say, well, we don't know if it was actually him. Okay, the anonymous writer named Shakespeare, whomever that might be, was the greatest playwright ever. And it's like the dumbest argument I've ever heard. Like, okay, whomever that person is. And so this idea of the hierarchy of the good and the hierarchy of being is a Western value. Now, you might be hearing me say this, say, Charlie, of course it is. No, your children are learning a postmodernist belief that there is no such thing as objective good. It's nothing more than your opinion, your truth, or a power dynamic. This is why when you walk into a postmodern art museum, it's absolute garbage. Right? It's like a big red dot, and they're like, this is the greatest thing ever. Like, no, it's not. I want to go look at Monet, or I want to go look at Rembrandt's. Like, that's beautiful, right? Because it takes skill, and it's in the pursuit of the ultimate good. Anyway, that's not what they're teaching children. So I want to just commend you, because we need more conservatives in the arts to be able to pursue beauty. Now, what is beauty? That which is perfected in being. Okay, so how do you do that? Your style matters more than your substance. We said this earlier. I have to reinforce this time and time again. Very few people a year from now will remember the details of my speech, but you'll remember that I had energy, that I leaned into my speech. You'll remember more how I gave my speech than what I said in my speech. So if you walk into your theater class and you just say, you know what, every single leftist out there is a bigot. It's actually mostly true, but it's not something I would lead with in that style. Instead, if you say, hey, I have a question. Why is it that almost all the liberals on Twitter treated Tim Scott as an awful person based on his skin color? Why is that? All of a sudden, that's an unassuming, inquisitive, vulnerable way to introduce an equal truth. And this is something that we must understand in the art of persuasion, is that all of a sudden you just come in completely guns a-blazing. You're not going to win a lot of people over. And then finally, there is no substitute of knowing your stuff. So where do you know your stuff? Well, very selfishly, we do 2 podcasts a day. We're on over 100 radio stations every single day. I dig really deep in our podcasts, and Lee knows that. She listens to them, and I take it very seriously. It is what I think about when I'm not doing it. I'm thinking about it all the time of how can I analyze what's happening in the country and communicate it to my audience through a historical lens. And I spend 2 hours a day just reading the great books and rereading the Federalist Papers and just getting into what really matters, and it helps me get a lens. I'm only saying that as a shameless plug. There's a lot of other great resources, though. Historical resources, Hillsdale does a great job. Hoover Institution does a great job. More kind of, what you would consider fair, go to realclearpolitics.com. It's an aggregator of the best news stories from the left and the right and commentary from both. That's a great place. The final thing I'll say this, in the art of persuasion, we as conservatives don't ask enough questions. The 2 greatest communicators of all time, Jesus Christ and Socrates, basically went around asking people questions. They just went around. Who do men say that I am? It's a pretty powerful question. Of course, Jesus said that to his disciples, and they didn't answer with Jesus. No, they say you're Elijah or John the Baptist, right? But anyway, that's a theological point. The point is asking questions matters. Do you have a quick follow-up?
Oh, no, I just wanted to say congratulations again to you and Erica.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you very much. So, thank you. So. Yeah, next question.
Hi, so my name is Benjamin, and next year I'll be going to college in Nashville.
Belmont?
So, yeah.
I heard about you.
Yeah, awesome. Probably from my mom over there.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you had any advice for me as a conservative going to college next year.
Yeah, man. Thank you. So what are you studying?
Graphic design.
See, we need more artists. I'm so pleased to hear this. This is awesome. We need more artists. And all of us are impacted by art in one way or the other, and it's a very important thing. So I think you have to do some praying and some reflecting before you go to college. It's very important. And write down what you want to get out of college and what you know to be true. It's very important. Like, what are your non-negotiable truths? This is something that high school kids don't do enough sometimes, because even at Belmont, you're going to encounter evangelistic atheism and very attractive socialism. It just happens. You're around it. You start to think everyone's riding bikes, and it's a beautiful fall day in Nashville, and no one eats meat, and it's like you kind of thought, look, what if everyone lived this way? And no one has to pay for anything, and I can sleep until 1 p.m., and it's really fun. Like, this is kind of, they've basically turned a whole country into a college campus, right? Where it's like, yeah, everyone can just ride bikes, and there's no responsibility. I'm saying this somewhat facetiously because if you don't have those guardrails in place, you're like, no, this is actually not real life, and I'm going to resist this, and I know how human beings should operate with the natural world. That's a very important thing. And then finally, just continue to have good cheer in all things that you're doing. College does a great job at depressing people. They're experts at it. It's actually one of the reasons I hate college, because it gets these kids, they get in these mind traps, and they're like, I just read Nietzsche, and I don't know if anything's real, and God is dead, and there's nothing more, like you're thinking way too much about that, okay? Like, just take a deep breath and keep of good cheer. And stay of things in the direction of ultimate truth is my other big point. You're going to Belmont, and so we have a Turning Point USA chapter, and so I hope you join it. That's my final piece of advice, is join your Turning Point USA chapter. So, good. We'll do a couple more. If any of the young people have questions, we'll do preference for any of the students if you guys want to get in line. If not, we'll wrap it up. Yes?
Thanks, Charlie, for showing up.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, man. More than you know. All right, I wanted to speak to something you spoke about earlier, about getting involved. Right? I called the governor's office. I get his aid. You'll never speak to the governor. But on that vein, I asked him about what's going on at the border. Okay? What's going on with these kids, bringing them across. He laid it off on the federals. Oh, they're the federals that are doing that. The Border Patrol, they're federal. Okay? Now, clearly, under the Federalist Papers, Article 41, it states that the governor can supersede the federal government if they're doing things that are illegal, that are unsafe to the population and the citizens of said state, Texas. So, my question is, why then hasn't the governor used that to his advantage and stopped this atrocity?
Yeah, so I'll do the best I can on the constitutional law, and Chip can help. So the Federalist is really instructive. It is not law. So these were anonymously written newspaper articles. No, but it's important you're reading them. Don't make no. This was the philosophical belief behind the Constitution. They're awesome, but they're not laws. The reason. We're getting close to that point where the question needs to be asked of the governor of Texas: what is the line? When do you call the Texas Rangers and DPS? This is a dramatic move, and we as conservatives should be prayerful and slow to do dramatic moves. Let me just say that again. We as conservatives should be prayerful and slow. Why? Because every piece of history shows that dramatic moves can end terribly if they're not done so dramatically or prayerfully. But I think we're getting close to that point where Texas needs to reestablish its sovereignty and needs to say, if the federal government will not secure this border, we will secure this border. I believe that has been reached. I do. And I want to just reinforce that. That is a dramatic action, because that would basically saying usurping whatever the federal government's supposed to do. Now, however, we all know the human cost of the border of what's happening right now. We know what it's happening to its citizens, and he swore an oath to protect the citizens of Texas. And Texas is a unique thing, more so than Arizona, because you guys have parts of your apparatus of government that can be more easily mobilized towards this than other states, such as Texas Rangers and others. I would ask that question for another 30 days, and if you don't see any action from the federal government, a very simple question is, wait a second. If Portland and Seattle can say they're not going to enforce federal immigration law, why can't Texas say they're going to enforce federal immigration law? And that should be the point that you make. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. So we'll take three more, if that's okay. And sorry, you four, and we can have someone at the end. Whatever. We'll go as much as we can until I get pulled up.
Hi, my name is Marilyn. I'm the campus coordinator at UT Austin.
Turning Point USA. It's awesome.
And I'm also an intern at the Republican Party of Texas. And both of those jobs I love, and I basically do it full time, both of them. I put school kind of secondhand because it wasn't helping me. but it can be very emotionally draining, and there are days where I hear negativity on the phone at the RPT and death threats on UT campus, and so how do you? I like jumped in the deep end. I didn't really go in slowly, so how do you emotionally like handle all that negativity, especially if I have to tell somebody I can't help them when I'm not in any power to do so?
So what a great question. First of all, for all the people out here that are looking for something to do, young conservatives need your help. They need your prayers. They need you to even say, hey, come over for a meal. Let me text you every so often. Come to church with me. I mean, young conservatives are the front lines of this. By the way, just so you guys know, young conservatives disproportionately knock on the doors and make the phone calls for a lot of these successful races in these campaigns. They do. And so just understand that. And they're bearing the brunt of a lot of this. So I'm going to give you one piece of advice you might not expect, which is spend some free time shutting off your phone and just getting away from all. I think I have a whole speech on social media and these devices that I think are destroying our humanity. Huh?
I run the Instagram for you.
I know. You're probably the social media manager. But here's the thing, is that a cheerful man or cheerful woman is someone who is always pursuing wisdom. And so find time you can block off where you are exploring truth. You're a smart person. If you find yourself getting in a hole of negativity, and I'm the same way, I'm not carving out enough time to push my mind to things that are true, that things that are real, that are new, exciting, could be historical, scientific, whatever that might be. You need to go find time for yourself to do that. Now, that's a different suggestion than other people might give you. Other people might go, oh, go find time for yourself and go out with your friends. That might be it. But you strike me as someone who really cares about the deeper things that matter. And so you need to find that 45 minutes to an hour. You're like, you know what? I'm going to go listen to Thomas Sowell for an hour. Talk about race relations in America. That alone will start to get your mind thinking from a completely different perspective. And you're on the front lines. It's not easy. You'll feel helpless. But when you're learning, you'll feel less helpless and more in a place to be activated for action. But I just want you to know, look around. You are not alone. You have a support network around you, and we need you. Look, people tell me all the time, they say, Charlie, don't burn out. That's not going to be the problem. Trust me. So, and it would have been years ago when I would have just said no more. But I worry about a lot of our young conservatives at Turning Point. It's hard. They are getting, every single day, they're getting hit. And it's up for the adults, the guardians, where it was easy to be a Reagan conservative in the 80s versus now. Now it is your whole life. If you decide to do it, they will change the way you live and with it your livelihood. But we have your back, and we deeply appreciate that. So thank you.
So my name is Marilee, and I go to UT Austin, but I'm actually from South Texas. And
Awesome.
So my question is more of advice. So there's an issue going back home where people are culturally conservative, but politically they vote Democrat no matter what. What is your advice to help change that community's mindset that voting conservative is bad?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm guessing it's a lot of Hispanic voters as well, right? And so I'm by no means an expert in the Hispanic community. I'm not. We did do our Young Latino Leadership Summit recently in Phoenix. It was a huge success. I have a view of the Hispanic community that is different than what I think is more of the, let's say, the George W. Bush view. Okay? Let me just say. My view is that we have to lean in on social conservatism and be very clear the Republican Party is the party of order and of values when it comes to the Hispanic community, especially when it comes to the family. I don't think we've done a good enough job of that, especially contrasting that with Democrats. But also, I know how frustrating it is because they're like, oh yeah, we believe in the family, we're pro-life, but we're Democrat. You're like, oh my goodness, why? That's where you got to come in and be activistic about it. Trump did make inroads in the Rio Grande Valley. He did. He showed that it can be done more than ever. And it's a long fight. It's a long game. It's going to take time, it's going to take some effort over time. But I wanted to say the fact you're even thinking about this is a good thing. And look, I'm a big believer that the Hispanic community in Texas and in Arizona, we don't win them over by talking about amnesty or any of that. I think we win them over by doubling down as who we are as conservatives. Small business. Law and order, which is a big one because a lot of Hispanic families saw firsthand what happens when law and order falls apart in Nicaragua and Honduras and Guatemala. And then finally, values. pro-life and pro-family. But it also is going to take wonderful communicators like you to run for office and be a face and a voice for the Republican Party. And then we have to do something that Trump did. Go ask for the vote of Hispanic voters. Just go ask. Be like, I'm here, please vote for me. Here's where you agree with me, here's where you disagree with me. And by the way, you know that people still might vote for you even though they disagree with you. Agreement is not even, it's one of them, but it's not the only indicator. Sometimes people will vote with people they don't agree with because like that guy's a fighter. I like his style. He shows up. He asks for my voice. Asks my vote. He makes sense. Okay, I'll vote for him. Trump kind of had that. And I also believe Trump did better in the Hispanic community because he embraced the macho man in kind of this hyper-feminized society, which just drives me absolutely out of control as we become so hyper-feminized in our country. But I want to commend you because leaders like you matter more than ever before, and God bless you. It's really terrific. So thank you. So 2 more. We'll go 2 more. Now, before I get to this question, I do want to mention just something about defund police, and then I'm going to reinforce a shameless plug if you guys will be in a position to help me out and help us with a favor. Number 1, they do not want to get rid of the police in our country. They don't. This is a very important point. We are playing their game. I've studied this. I did a whole podcast on this. They want a national police force. Let me just say that again. They are defunding the police intentionally in these cities to force the hand of a national police force. And it makes sense, right? They don't actually believe, there are a couple utopians here and there that are like, oh, we can live without police. Those are not the serious people. They want every police officer in the country and every sheriff in the country to be eliminated and working for the federal government. Trained in critical race theory, steeped in all of their radicalism. So we have to start talking about this of where it's really headed, which is not that there will be no police, but instead police that work for them. So, and we're playing a chess game. It makes sense, right? Do you think Nancy Pelosi actually wants to get rid of police? No, of course not. She would love to have a Gestapo-style squad, though, that can go to places she wants them to and not go to other places. So we got to get specific on why they're trying to defund local police, because then national police will fill that void. So if that argument made sense to you guys, we do that on our podcast. So here's one way you can help us. We're getting killed by big tech every single day, okay? The only reason that we haven't gotten totally taken off is when I speak at audiences like this, and people organically subscribe to our podcast. So you guys can do that. Every single phone out here has a podcast app. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, there's got to be a 14-year-old around here somewhere that can help. But if everyone took out their phone and took out the podcast app, you have it right there on your Apple phone. I know this is shameless, but it really helps us out away from being totally canceled and censored. And just type in the Charlie Kirk Show and hit subscribe. That, when rooms like this do that, it makes it less likely that Apple just kicks us off altogether. And some of our Turning Point kids can help you guys. Raise your hands if you have no idea how to do it on your phone. Just go to them and hand them your phone. But every single phone has a podcast app. You can help all of there. It's free of charge, guys, and I think you'll find a lot out of it as a daily news source and information. It really blesses us. Okay, next question.
My name is Madison, and I just started at Ingram Tom Moore High School chapter.
That's awesome.
And I have a conservative administration, so we have strong leaders in our school. The only problem is the kids don't care. So my question is, what do I do now? How do I get them involved?
So our team is going to be very helpful in assisting you, our wonderful team at Turning Point. And look, here's the one thing is leadership is something that is so important for our country in general. You've now decided to be a leader. So one of my favorite quotes is by George S. Patton, who says, lead, follow, or get out of the way. Leadership is hard. It means you got to take responsibility for your actions. You can delegate authority, but you can't delegate responsibility. But at this point now, you got to be creative. You got to say, hey, what ideas can I use to try to grow membership, that I can attract other people to our club, that I can try to win over potential people? And so, but then also requires you to be active and persuasive. So at Turning Point USA, there is not one job in the organization that I didn't previously do. So when I first started at Turning Point, I was in your shoes. I literally would show up at a college campus with a card table and just start talking to people about America. I was like, oh, cool, now we have a chapter here, I guess. I didn't even know what a chapter was. Completely and totally organic, right? As bottom up as it gets. And I could tell you this, persistence and creativity, and also being someone that people want to spend time with, right? Being someone that understands different dynamics, that will always end every conversation with a smile, and being someone that is really an ambassador of these ideas. But I want to commend you. Starting a Turning Point USA group is an amazing thing. And the final thing I'll say is this. It'll develop the most important thing that a young person can have, which is your character. Being a leader at a young age and developing your character is something that lasts forever. So character comes from a Greek word that literally means tattoo or imprint, built into you. So rarely do we ask, are we actually creating young people with strong character? We fill them with facts, not even sometimes. We fill them with anger, but character. And you stepping into this leadership role is going to make you a tougher person and more likely to have strong character for the rest of your life. That's something that you should really be thankful for. All right. This will be the last question. Is that okay, Lee? Last question? What time is it? Okay. Okay, good.
Hi, Charlie. I'm Rachel from UTSA Turning Point Chapter. And I was just wondering, there's been, maybe this is more familiar to me because I've lived in a city my whole life as a conservative. And there has been a trend of conservatives moving out of cities to rural areas. Does this concern you when it comes back to the office?
So, say that again. There's been a trend of conservatives moving from city to rural?
Yeah, there has been a trend of conservatives moving out to cities, to rural areas.
Got it. Okay.
So like San Antonio to surrounding areas.
Got it.
Fredericksburg.
So I got all sorts of fun ideas. So I think buildings are way too high in America. I think the higher cities go, the more liberal they become. Seriously. San Antonio and Austin. Ask yourself the question. The higher the buildings have gotten in Austin, has it gotten more conservative, more liberal? How about San Antonio? Dallas? Houston? Makes sense. Why? The higher the building, more likely to rent. Less likely to own. Tragedy of the commons. Now, those of you that work on ranches, those of you that work in the earth, something worth preserving, right? You have ownership over the land. You just live in some high-rise in Austin. You're literally looking down on the rest of the country. Like, whatever. So that's why I think the Republican Party should say, we are now going to say there's a moratorium on any building over 3 stories in the entire country. Go west and build a family. No, seriously. It will naturally create more conservative voters by just default. Because as soon as all of a sudden you're out in Fredericksburg, Texas, and you're owning an acre of land, it's really hard to be kind of like trendy liberal. Like, no, you got to, you know what I mean? No, I've always said liberalism is a luxury of the people that have way too much time on their hands. No, seriously. Like protest this, abolish that. You know, you're not spending enough time in the land with your family or with things that matter. So I'm being half sarcastic with that answer, but I actually think it's a great thing for America the more people live in touch with the soil that gives us life. I really do. I think that is a uniquely American quality that we should never, ever, ever forget. Truly. And so I got all sorts of crazy ideas like that, but I think that Republicans should have a horizontal view of American growth, not a vertical view of American growth. So it's a great question. So let me kind of summarize all this together, guys. I want to just thank you again for coming tonight. It's late, I know. There's a lot of other things you could do. But we're going to win. Let me say that again. You take out a piece of paper tonight and you write it to yourself at the top of the piece of paper. And you might look at that, and if you don't believe it, then you're not in the fight enough. Look at that handwriting that says, we're going to win. And if you're like, no, this is no place for cynicism or pessimism. Because again, we're Americans. Who we are, my grandfather who fought in World War II, and all of you that served our country so amazingly, you know that there is an impossible spirit in our country. We're dealing with like a couple thousand angry internet trolls that eat vegan. Like, this is not Normandy Beach, okay? We got dealing with some angry billionaires and people with computers. Like, okay, we can do this. We can. And here's the thing. The people are with us. The American people are with us, of every race, of every background. That they're with our belief system, and they're with our style and form of governance. Now, not everything is going to mesh perfectly, but I actually think there's a new era of Republican politics that's coming post-Trump. And you know what? We should thank President Trump for actually everything he did for our country. We really should. And because so much of this would not be possible without Trump, where it's a Republican Party that gets into this active posture, that is not going to take this nonsense from the left, and that is going to create and build new things. That's going to say, you know what, we're going to create new businesses, build bigger families. We're going to think creatively about the issues in front of us. And so I'm going to go back to that. We're going to win. That is only true if you commit yourself to action. So you might say, Charlie, I still don't have any hope. Well, after hearing every young person commit to fight, that should give you hope. But let me tell you this. The second law of thermodynamics is the inevitable law of decay. We know Newtonian physics, force equals mass times acceleration. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. There's also the law of the left. The law of the left is they destroy everything they touch, quickly. Everything. We're going to get another shot at this big time. In fact, I feel it in the air. Lee, would you agree the Lord is moving in ways we've never seen before? And by the way, do not ever forsake or forget the real reason we're all here, the real relationship, that a vertical relationship that you have with your Creator. And I'm having more God moments happen than ever before, truly. That is just so powerful, and it's something that's beyond anything I could put into words. But then comes the part where you're going to now have to say, I'm getting out of the chair and into the arena. Teddy Roosevelt had a great quote about the man in the arena. And that's the person that really matters. And one of the biggest lies that some conservatives believe is the enemy whispering in your ear. What I do doesn't matter. What I do is not going to make a difference. What I do, from joining the local Republican group or knocking on doors or supporting a school board candidate, or at the very least making my views known, that doesn't matter. The left is betting on conservative apathy. The left knows that if we stay silent and stay put, they win everything. But there's something that was being whispered in Joe Biden's ear, not the speech, something else. And he knows it. All throughout his speech is that you might lose power soon. The people aren't with you. So everything's always trying to overcompensate. A bigger spending bill, more free money, trying to pass H.R. 1. They are paranoid, and I'll prove it to you. Have you ever seen such unhappy winners? They're the angriest winners I've ever seen. They're the angriest group of people that have power that I've ever seen. And I understand the sentiment that they're going to do it again. We're going to fix the election laws because we're solution-based people and we're staying on top of it. We are. The action is what matters most. And so my call to action for you tonight is to get out of the spectator stands and then into the arena. And that means doing something you otherwise wouldn't have done before. And when that happens, that little voice in Joe Biden's ear is all of a sudden going to see itself on a television screen, where in the most dramatic way imaginable, they're not going to just lose power, but all of a sudden school board races are going to completely shift. Critical race theory is going to get put in its rightful place in the dustbin of history and never teach that garbage to our children ever again. Where there will be a moment, and it's going to happen, as Ernest Hemingway said, gradually then suddenly. So you guys know where my heart's at. I'm doing everything I possibly can, and we are at Turning Point USA. And I'm traveling the country. We'll be in Bastrop tomorrow, giving a different speech if you guys want to come all the way out there. Then I'm literally going to Seattle, Washington, to go give a speech at 2 churches on Sunday. Antifa tried to cancel one of the churches, and we didn't let that happen, and so we got another church, which is great. And so this is our home. America's our home. We got to take ownership of it and stay active on top of it. I'm inspired by you. I'm inspired by the young activists here. You guys have the power. One person can definitely has and will change the world, but look around you. This is happening all across America in bigger numbers than ever before. The worst thing you could do is stay put and do nothing. And I'm telling you, you look at that piece of paper, we're going to win. And 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, I'm going to revisit this beautiful part of America. And you're going to say, Charlie, I almost half believed you that one night. But now we're winning. And the left is on defense. And I remember that night when I chose to believe and do something about it. And that's your call to action. God bless you guys. Thanks so much.